I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 113. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey guys, welcome back to the Velocity Work Podcast. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Today, we are talking about how much you should invest in coaching. We're going to talk about the money. So this episode is for those of you who are considering hiring a coach or taking part in some sort of program or mastermind or consultant or et cetera, et cetera. A solid guide is 3% of top line revenue to be invested into the growth of the business. Now, I'm not talking marketing budget. Like that to me is a very separate thing. Coaching and development, growth development, how to make sure that you are growing sustainably along the way and on the right track to where you really want to go. That's what I mean for this 3%. It's so important and it's so easy to lose sight of as the owner. You're busy doing what you're doing and making this business work and run and doing all the things that you know how to do, but having some sort of guidance for the actual growth and dealing with the growth and fostering the growth and developing yourself as the owner so that that can continue to happen. That's what I mean by the 3%. So if you're a 100K business and you're just lifting off the ground, then it's about $3,000 a year that you would put towards that development, that fostering of the growth. If your business is making $300,000 a year, $9,000 towards the development and fostering of the growth of the business and of you. And using that same guide, if you're making $1 million, about $30,000 is what you would put towards the development and growth. So you can see, I'm just giving you a few number examples. Many of you tell me you don't like to do math. So there you go. There's a few examples, but just get out your calculator and figure out what's your gross revenue and take that times 0.03. And that can be a good guide for what to spend and invest in coaching for yourself. There is and will be a return on that investment if you have a great coach and a great facilitator for all of that, and if you show up to actually get some results. So that's the starting place as the guide is 3% of top line revenue. Now, with that said, last week on the podcast, we talked a lot about the long game and playing the long game and indicators that you're playing a long game. And I also gave some indicators to tell when you're playing the short game. You want to play the long game. So stemming from that episode, that conversation is this idea that if you are going to make this investment, whatever it is, if it's 3%, if it's a little under, if it's a little over, if it's 3% and your overhead is a little high, so it feels tighter, you have to make a decision and you have to be in a good place when you're making the investment that you don't need anything quick from it. It's about you developing, you creating sustainability in the business, you making wise, smart calls. And if you can't make that investment and get yourself in a place where you don't need something from it, then you should not make the investment. It will suffocate the business, the investment that you made. It'll drain you. It'll create stress and anxiety. You won't show up fully because you're in your head hoping you get a return. Like it's just not going to work out very well. So my advice is don't make the investment if you can't come from that place when making it. Now, no matter if it's the investment that you're going to make, if it's right on the money at 3%, if it's a little over, if it's a little under, no matter what, if you can make that investment from the place of this feels like a wise investment, I expect a return from it. I'm going to show up and do the part that I need to do and that I need to contribute, and let's go. I'm all in. That's a very healthy place to make that investment from. So the 3% guide, I really like to share that with people who haven't invested before or they feel lost. Like, is this crazy? I know that we get to decide that for ourselves. And I'm going to give you some examples in a moment of when I've been off and, above and below that 3% for myself and how I thought about that. But when you're trying to make the decision, and this is kind of new to you, go with the 3% because that is a really healthy number. It's not a lot to invest when you're talking about the growth and development, but you do have to make the right call for you. I'm saying this as a blanket statement, and that's why I don't want this to be a rule. It's a guide because you know all your numbers and you can see if you're bloated in certain areas, if things are really tight and stressful. And so 3% feels like not possible. If it doesn't feel realistic for you, then okay, you've got some things to clean up, which arguably you could probably really use some sort of coach or a program or an expert to help you get on track so that you can continue to grow sustainably, right? How do you need to shift? How do things need to shift in the business? So maybe that investment, 3%, is a really wise investment. It depends on what you're investing in, and it depends on where you can come from. You have to come from a calm place and a certain place and a confident place when you're making the investment, and not from a place of fear and graspiness and neediness. I can always feel it when someone enters into mastery group or a sprint, or even as a private client where we start to have an engagement there. I can always feel, I can sniff it when there is desperation involved in the investment versus when it just feels like a really wise, smart call and they're all in. And they don't say those words. I can just feel it from them. It doesn't happen that often, actually. I think that the people that we tend to attract here at Velocity Work are pretty dialed in with that, at least by the time they get on the phone with me or they enter into a program or something. But when I do experience that from someone, I can just feel it on them. I know now enough to make sure to let them know that this is likely not the right time for them to enter this because I can feel it on them. And I am never going to, and nor any of my programs will ever be able to fulfill that void, that desperation, that neediness that they have. That is not how this works. The approach of the owner makes a huge difference in the results that you get out of the coaching. So anytime I sniff that nowadays, I just am really clear with, this may not be the best fit, at least not right now. Here's what I would suggest. And then give them some advice based on the conversation. And then, you know what? Hopefully I see them back down the road at some point. That would be great. But I won't touch it. And you shouldn't do it. You should really understand that about yourself. And you shouldn't attempt to enter in if there's a bit of desperation and neediness. So let's go back to the 3% for a second. I have talked to a lot of business owners that have been through my programs or been one-on-one clients. And especially early on in the business when I was really getting feedback and building the business and tailoring it based on feedback from clients, I would ask them, what would you pay for this thing that we just did? What would you pay for? I know what I asked you to pay for it. What would you pay for it? And a lot of the time, I figured this out on my own, a lot of the time that the number that they would give worked out to be about 3% of what they were bringing in, which was fascinating to me. I loved that pattern. And then I was talking to my husband about it and some other business owners, entrepreneurs that I know, and then also clients. I went back to clients and I would say, hey, the number that you told me is about 3% of your top line revenue. Does that feel like that could be a bit of a guide for you in the future when you're focusing on growth and investing in growth and development? Do you think that feels reasonable? And they would think about it for a second and they'd say, yeah, it feels reasonable. Like that feels like it's not hard to just allocate 3%. I don't have to worry about it. It's just done. It's allocated. And I loved that. And the more people I talked about, there were some that were at 4, 5. There was one that was at 2 that was under 3. And, but I could see reasons for it, right? So anyway, all in all, an average was 3 that came out of that discovery, 3%. So I started thinking about that for myself and looking back on my history with the coaching that I have invested in over the years and now what I'm doing and how I'm investing now. There was a time in 2010, I joined a mastermind group and it was $10,000 a year. And that was a lot for me back then. So when I look back on that was about a 10% investment of my top line revenue. I was making about $100,000 at that time. And I remember feeling a little desperate, a little like, almost like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to put it all in because I know if I put it all in, there's going to be a return on the investment and it's only going to be good. But the undercurrent of all of it was this better give me my money back. Like, I better get a return on my investment. Like, that was the tone that was happening in my head, or the underlying thought that was driving all of it was like, yeah, I'm doing this. And sort of side note, I better make my money back. It was almost like I needed it to happen. And I think back to that version of myself, and I don't regret making that investment, because actually what came out of that was not a quick return in terms of money, but it was a huge and very quick return in terms of friendship. I have had those friends. That group was so special to me and will be for good forever. And there's a couple of people from that group I talk to all the time. We're dear friends. That is meaningful to me. And I can have really drop in quickly and have deep conversations with them about what's going on in business, about what I'm thinking about the challenges that I'm experiencing, and life. So it's not just about business. These are really close people. That's amazing, right? Like, okay, I paid 10 grand to be a part of something. I thought I was going to make it back in business. I thought I was going to make it back financially. And that took a really long time to make back, but the relationships it was amazing that came out of that. So I don't have any regrets, but the reason I made that, what I was banking on didn't happen. And that hurt back then. That was like, I needed it to happen and it didn't. And that was deflating, even though I had made all these friendships. So it's interesting. The place that I was in when I made that bigger investment was a crappy place. Like, it was always going to be the way it was because of the approach that I took and the place that I was coming from. I do not make decisions like that anymore. It's so foreign to me to play around with the idea that I used to think like that I used to think, well, it's better give me money back. No, that's like you're at the whim of the world. Like, I hope I get my money back. I don't hope for things anymore. I have intentions and I set out and I believe what I need to believe and I think what I need to think and I take the actions I need to take and I create what I want to create. Period. It doesn't always go as planned, but I never end up like sulking because of how it turned out. No way. It's me. I claim and own full responsibility for the results I get, including the investments that I make, the return on the investments I make. And so now it's so foreign to me to think back to that version who experienced it that way and made the investment from that place. Now, more recently, in the last 2 years, the investment has actually been right on the money, or actually about 3.5% of top line revenue for us has gone back into coaching and development. This year, I'm going to make a bigger investment that's going to be about 10% again. But it's a very different feeling with it. I have no question. Number one, it's not a huge deal if for some freaking reason I actually don't have any financial return or it doesn't provide any kind of return that I thought. It's not going to crush me or my business at all. So it's okay. But I am going to go into it with I'm going all in. I'm going to make sure I show up fully for the investment and get a return. Like, it's going to happen. There isn't a question in my mind. And if it doesn't, okay, lessons learned, let's move on. That's very different from when I made a 10% investment back in 2010. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context for how I think about these things. And I shared a little bit about when I can feel someone that's coming to me thinking about making an investment in coaching with Velocity Work, and I can sniff it on them that they aren't ready. They're desperate. There's a neediness there. No, right? Like, that's a no. Now, the other thing I thought I would share is the private clients that I have. I know their numbers pretty well, so I do know the percentages that they are investing, and I thought I would share it with you. Now, when I was developing the private client program and thinking through the work and all that goes into it from my end and from their end, when I'm pricing this, I think about this ratio. I think about this 3% that I've been sharing with you. And all of the things that I do inside of Velocity Work, I try to make them a no-brainer. I try to make them so that it feels like, yeah, that's a yes. There is that sweet spot where it's a win-win. It's a win for Velocity Work and it's a win for the client. That's what I'm shooting for when I'm pricing this stuff. So for private client work, when I went back and did the math now and looked at the current clients, it ranges from on the low end, 2% of top line revenue, all the way up to the highest that it's been. I don't have anybody there right now because they've grown. So what they're paying me is a lesser percentage of their top line revenue. But back then when they started with me was 3.5% of their top line revenue. That's what they were investing. And it has been in that sweet spot. Now, as my clients grow and their revenue keeps growing, then it probably won't stay 2 or 3%. The actual investment will decrease down to, 1.9, 1.8. It depends what happens, right? But that's because my fee doesn't need to shift that much, and their growth is quite a bit. And so that's the beauty of this, is that once you find an investment and you go all in on it and you find that fit of a coach or a consultant, it really allows you to grow. For these people, they don't have to stay at 3% of top line revenue to keep getting the same awesome value. But 3% is about where they entered in, somewhere between 2 and 3. Now, as I grow, I'm curious the decisions and the investment I will make. And there will be times it's above 3, just like this year when I'm going to be investing more. But there will be times where it's probably about 3 or a little less. It's going to depend on what I think I need, what I really enjoy, and what I feel like I can sink my teeth into in order to grow. It needs to be the same for you. So when you are thinking about the investments that you are making, the 3% can be a good guide. But listen, if you are coming from a really great place and a strong place, and it feels like a positive decision and a non-desperate decision, a long game approach with an investment that's higher than 3% of your top line revenue, who is to say that that is wrong? I genuinely believe that when it comes down to it, you and how you feel and how you approach the investments, and if you're playing the long game, then I certainly shouldn't tell you that you should only be investing 3%. But if you don't have that energy, that approach when you are spending the money, when you are transferring the money for that investment, if it feels desperate, needy, and not okay, and you're going to need it back quick or else, then don't make the investment. But oftentimes what I find is that the 3% is a decent guide where it won't feel like such a stretch that it stresses you out and you tend to have that fear come up. And it feels healthy enough that it's probably the right size of investment to get the kind of helping and coach that you need to really develop yourself. And that's a guide. So if you're starting new, then maybe start looking at programs or coaches or things that are about that. Maybe a little bit less, right? But that's a guide, is the 3%. Okay, I hope this helps you guys determine what could be really useful for you. And I hope that this helps you decide to go all in on yourself. Get a coach, develop yourself, foster the growth of the firm, which has everything to do with you and how you operate and how you are fostering the growth of the firm. So get yourself some coaching. Take a look at your numbers. Start with the 3% of your top line revenue and then go from there. If that number feels too big and you're going to be too desperate about the result, then back down and see where you can get with like what feels healthy, and you're all in, and it's okay if you don't make it back as fast as you thought you were going to make it back. But you're going to do everything in your power to make sure that you do get that ideal outcome. So find your number, find that healthy place, and get yourself some development. Get yourself some coaching so that you can grow this firm in the ways that you want, that delivers you to the firm that you've always imagined and the life that you've imagined. That's very possible. Plug in. All right, everybody, have such a good week. I'll talk to you next Tuesday. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.